Okay, good to see everybody here. We just went over some backgrounds. It's kind of exciting to learn what you're doing, who you're with, and where you're from. It sounds like we've got a mixed bag as far as involvement with DOE and SBIR. That helps me as I'm going through this whole thing and figuring out what to concentrate on and not. I'm Jerry Cronin, as Steve said. I'm the executive director of OpenSeas. We are an organization incubator / accelerator that works with organizations and innovators / businesses, basically looking to find technologies that solve difficult problems in the maritime and energy space and help commercialize them. Because there's a difference between the technology and actually bringing it into commercial reality, as some of you mentioned before in the introductions. So today's session, these are the things we're going to cover. You see the bullets up there. We're going to overview the opportunity and look at some important dates. Then we'll look at how the flow works for this all the way up to the submission of a phase one. We'll also talk about the SBIR, STTR program in general. Let you know what assistance is available, because this is really purposes to do two things. Get you to consider to go after one of these SBIRs related to the topics, and also line you up as required or as necessary with the assistance of a number of us called Department of Energy power connectors, and OpenSeas is a power connector. And at the end of this slide deck, I've got a listing of links to all the resources that I'll have talked about, because you don't want to remember the stuff all by your lonesome. And Steve will send out a copy of this to everybody who's signed up so people get the info. So here we go. The opportunity is from the Department of Energy. This is the second release of what they call their Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer Program. You see up there the logo of that program. They call this America's Seed Fund. This is a pretty good place to get monies to start working on technologies that solve important problems for the government, but also have the potential to go out into the commercial world and around which to build businesses. So it's really not a hardcore research grant. It's kind of that really lovely boundary area between taking research and taking it into the place where it becomes a sustained reality. Okay. These are the topics, and I've got in the resource section links to the release of topics. This in particular is what they call the Solar Energy Technology Office, and actually it's the WPTO, the Wind Power Technology Office. This is what they brought the power connectors on to help support. You'll find a number of other topics within that release, everything from some nuclear stuff, I think some storage stuff, some battery stuff, some grid stuff. But the power connectors are here to help folks who are particularly going after water-powered energy and solar energy type solutions. And you see the items there. When you pull down the topics, it'll have more info on those things, discussing particularly what they're looking for. And there's also some links in there to say if you have any additional questions about a particular topic and what they're looking for, where to contact the government. So pretty well done. For those of you who haven't done SBIRs before or STTRs, or you want to know what the kind of the play is as far as the funding on these, it's in three different areas: solar, water power technologies, what they call fast track, which I'll talk about, and then water power technologies in general. The maximum phase one awards for these things is $200,000. Okay, so that's what they're going for. That middle one you see, which says fast track only, that's a special thing they're doing where they're saying, hey, you've done enough work on the technology, we're willing to look at proposals that do phase one and phase two at the same time, because there's some technologies they're trying to speed up the rate of implementation and execution on. And those are the fast track ones. So that's potentially, if you write one of those, that's up to $1.3 million to get that done. So in a fast track, the thing to remember about that is you could submit both phase one and phase two at the same times. Now, that's a lot more work, but you can do it. Okay. Now let's talk about SBIRs, STTRs in general. You see the bullet points up there, but basically the feds are looking for research and development needs, And the whole purpose of the program is to say, if we're spending money on that, we want that to also end up with economic development in business and things getting commercialized. And there's been a heightened attention. There's heightened attention being played to that these days. They want to stimulate American innovation. They also want to stimulate participation by women and socially economically disadvantaged individuals, veterans. That's very, very important to the Department of Energy these days. So, yeah, that's part of it. Will be part of your responses when you put in your phase one. There'll be planning associated with that. And on the STTR, which is the tech transfer ones, they're looking for the transfer of research and development coming out of either universities or federal labs. And again, the idea is the US government's spending a whole lot of money on doing that research and developing these things. We'd like to see results going out to the American populace and the ability to build American businesses out of there. So those are the overall goals of the program. And they break it down into 3 phases. So you'll hear phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 SBIRs. Phase 1 is what this is about, except in the case if you're going after a fast track where it's phase 1 and phase 2. But think of phase 1 as sort of the feasibility part, okay? So you got an idea, you got a way you think you're gonna go about it, but you might have to do some modeling, you might have to do some simulation, you might have to do some research to say, does this actually work? But the other thing they're looking for, is it feasible? Okay, the tech exists, but can you really bring it to light? And then, like I said before, the commercial potential. They are looking for commercial potential in this stuff. And really, they're also looking at your organization. So they give you a phase, if they give you a phase 1, they're looking and saying, okay, how well do these folks execute? Are these folks that, if they go for a phase 2, are a good investment of the government's money to get things up and further things along? Phase 2, phase ones are typically between 50K and 250K for somewhere around 6 months to a year. Sometimes that's flexible depending on what you're doing. It all depends on the release that comes out. Phase 2, that's where you're continuing that R&D and that development stuff. It's based on what you did in phase 1. And you see, typically only phase 1 folks are eligible for the phase 2. But those awards can go up to 750K for 2 years. And in this case, in these DOE ones, they're looking at 1.1 million. So it usually depends on the agency. DOE comes out with different amounts depending upon the releases they're doing, but there's more money in phase 2. Now in phase 2, you're also doing commercialization stuff too. That's part of the work stream. And then phase 3, there's no money in phase 3 directly from the SBIR program, but what they're expecting at this point in time is that what you've developed, if it passes all the wickets in phase 1 and phase 2, and the idea works, you're able to execute it, you're able to pull it off. In phase 3 is where you get a contract with the government. They purchase what what you've developed, but it's also where they want you to be looking at the commercial markets too. What commercial companies can I bring this out to? So the nice thing about phase 3 is once you've been a recipient of phase 1 and phase 2, it puts you in a good contracting status with the government where they can go right to you and get what you've developed. So it's a pretty good program. Differences, you hear SBIR and STTR. In all cases, the applicant has to be that small business, right? So a university can't apply for an SBIR or an STTR, all right? It's got to be that small business, that small organization that does it. The STTR, what they're looking for is that you're bringing in expertise from a university or from some research institution, which can be like a university or a federal lab or a private research institution, that sort of thing. One of the good things about STTRs is, it's not on this slide, but I think it's on a subsequent slide. In a SBIR, they're expecting your organization to do the significant part of the work. In an STTR, where you might need some research, you might need a particular part of your technical solution that needs some innovation or something figured out. You might need access to some expensive testing equipment, or you might need some validation type work going on. In an STTR, you can spend more. It allows you to spend more money to get those services to get done what you need. And you see at the bottom bullets is what I'm talking about. In an STTR, up to 60% of that STTR can be contracted to a university or a research institution. In an SBIR, only 33% can you do that. And it increases to phase two in phase two, but it's still, that's looking for your organization to do the bulk of the work. The other difference is in an SBIR, the principal investigator, the PI, has to be employed at the particular organization that's applying for it. They cannot work full-time elsewhere during the project period. So you can't take a university professor or a research institution person and have them lead an SBIR for a small company somewhere if their full-time job is with the university or the research institution. With an STTR, that person you identify as the principal investigator can either work at the research institution or the small business. So, and this is laid out in the documentation around this. Something to consider. The program's been getting a lot of pushback from Congress around commercialization, because what occurred with the program, it ended up being sort of just a pure research set of funding. And they'd get to the end of it and they'd find out that, hey, none of this stuff is actually seeing the light of day or getting investment or having companies spring up around it. And that was one of the main purposes of the SBIR STTR program, to take that research and get it out there into a sustainable thing. So there's an increased focus on commercialization. So what does that mean? What we always recommend to folks is from the very get-go, from that, when you're starting to do phase one of the things you have to do in phase one is you got to come up with a commercialization plan. Commercialization needs to be one of your parallel work stream along with your technical stuff. This does two things for you. One, it tells a great story to the government, helps them choose your thing over somebody else who doesn't address those issues. And as either a researcher or somebody who's looking to develop a business, part of that commercialization work is you're going out and you're looking at markets and you're doing what's called market discovery or customer discovery. It is very rare that somebody does those activities and doesn't pivot or change their original concept a little bit, because you're going out there into the field and you're finding out, oh my gosh, I thought it would work this way, but it has to fit in this big, long process of things. I need to modify my innovation a little bit to fit within that process. Or you might find out that, hey, we duplicate what a lot of other people in the market are doing, but where they're really having the problem is here. And if we can crack that code, it puts us in better position for, as I said, commercializing your stuff. So what you're doing is trying to increase the probability that your innovation's going to see the light of day, that an actual product solution can go out to the market and go into the government and deal with the problems. So commercialization requirements and all this, we'll send out the deck later, so I'm not going to read the bullets to you. But the big thing here is they understand your commercialization is going to evolve. So on your initial submission, you're going to put in some stuff. You are required to say something about the commercialization potential of this. You might have an idea, you put it in there, it's feasible, you've done a little bit of research that says, okay, initial indications are good. The government understands that as you get in there and you do that customer discovery and that business modeling work in that phase one, that things change. That's totally acceptable. That can change your tech, that can change your business model. They want to see that, because what they don't want to see is you kind of keep in your own little world, you develop your thing, and then you find out, oh my gosh, nobody wants it or is going to use that. I've had that issue in the past. Back in the 90s, I built a brilliant expert system for wetlands delineation. I thought everybody'd want it. A year and a half coding. Thank God I was doing other stuff in the company. We did some other pivots, but launched the darn thing and not a single person wanted it. I wish I knew then what I know now. I would have saved 30,000 lines of code and a whole bunch of hours and cycles. So, and the responsibility for the commercialization is not with the government, it's with the business. But doing that work as a parallel stream to your tech development, it's going to set you up a lot better. Okay, for this particular announcement, okay, they've released the topics, and you've got a link to the topics on the resource page. So that's good. That happened on time. They held a number of seminars where the Water Energy Office and the Water Power Office spoke about what they were looking for. And there's link to those in the resource section also. What hasn't occurred is they haven't released the federal opportunity announcement. It was supposed to be released on the 11th of December, and here we are on the 14th, and still no sign of it. All right. So don't know when that's coming out. I checked it about an hour before I got on this Zoom call. Pay attention. One of the links I have in the resources, it says the DOE opportunity page. You'll find the information right there, so you can see if it's come out. But what I do advise is release 1 has its document in there. So you can call up release 1's document and say, look, it's not going to be very much, release 2 is not going to be very much different from release 1. Most of the bones are there, and that's going to tell you what they'll be looking for. All right. So, pay attention to that. The webinar, I did not see a link to the FOA opportunity announcement webinar because they haven't released the opportunity yet. And then they say the letters of intent for this are due on the 3rd of January. That date did not change on their site. I don't know if it'll change. I know the feedback we gave them as power connectors was you're getting really, really tight on schedule, but we don't know whether that date's going to change. So the place you go to is that opportunity page. It'll keep you apprised. And then the full applications, which is the phase 1 submittal, is due on the 21st. Currently, it's due on the 21st of February. Award notification, May 20th, to start July 1st is what they're thinking. So those are key dates to remember, and those dates will be on that opportunity page also. Now let's talk about the process. And this is the process to get it up to your phase 1 submittal. All right. First thing out of the gate, review and select topics. You're going to determine your approach, your letters of intent. There's a thing called PAMs, and I've got slides on this stuff following this one. You enter into that system. That's where you're going to submit your letter of intent. That's where you submit all your documentation. Then there's a thing where you might or might not receive notification after review of those letters of intent. You develop your project documentation, you prepare and submit your phase 1. So let's walk through that a little bit. Okay. Reviewing and selecting the topics. They're on the DOE opportunity site. There's a link there. Plus, I also have the link to it in that resources section. So we'll send the slides out. You can just click on it. You get right to it. As we progress along with this, I'll be building the slide deck and adding more resources to this thing, so it's a good reference. The other thing you might take a look at, which I advise, is the DOE does market studies on many of these topic areas, so you can gain insight from those. And I've got the link to their market research area. You can pop in there and see if there's market research on the particular topic or topics you are interested in. Determining your project approach. Once you choose a topic, okay, you have to kind of start putting together your vision for the whole thing, because that's going to inform you from your letter of intent through your phase 1 submittal and execution through your phase 2, all the way up to your phase 3. All right. So the way to start this off is by asking yourself the top stuff, the top items here. What's the DOE looking for, and why is it important? And when you read their instructions on producing an abstract or a letter of intent, they're asking for that type of stuff. How are you going to provide it? What's your approach? And then why is your way better? Okay, is it going to produce something significantly different than what's out there already? Because those game changers are what the government's looking for, but it's also what the market's looking for commercialization. If the pens in the world are black and you come up with a blue-black pen, there's not much differential value created there. If you find a way to reduce corrosion on intake pumps by 50%, that's significant value. There's a lot of numbers you can run against that. So how's your way better? And then kind of look out into the future. Once I've implemented what I'm talking about, what's my vision? What's it look like? All right. And then the standard project management stuff, because you're going to need that in your submittal and build into a schedule and resources and all that other good stuff. What are the tasks you need to get there? What's the schedule for doing it? And what are the resources and disciplines you're going to need? Why is this important? Okay. Hypothetically, the government's going to give you 200K. There'll be some matching requirement in there. Well, they'll say you got to match it with 100K, you got to match it with 200K, and there'll be seminars put on by the power connectors of how to do that, that budgeting stuff. But you want to take a look and say, wait a second, to get to this point, what I'm thinking about, it's going to cost me $1 million. If I get 200 from the government and say I match it with that, I don't have the money to do that. Okay. So then what you do is you make some decisions. Can I reduce the scope of what I'm talking about so it fits within the particular budget I have available? All right. So getting an idea about that's important. And then the last item, like I said, the government's looking more and more at this. What's the market opportunity for commercialization? How might you exploit it? And what's your vision for doing so? And what you want to avoid is saying everybody in the world's going to want this. If you can look for a couple of market segments or a couple of market niches and say, yeah, this is where we'd look at first because we think there's a real need for it there. And we've looked at Google and we've looked at some papers and some articles, and it indicates that this would solve a problem. That's good stuff. So that's project approach. Then you're going to prepare a letter of intent. Some of these slides have an awful lot of bullets on them. Like I said, I'm not going to go through them all because all that information you can get to in a link in the resource section. But a letter of intent's pretty simple. The top the top 5 bullets are boilerplate. Title, which ones you're going after, who the principal investigator is. Okay. The bottom part is that 500-word technical abstract that you have to submit through that PAM system to tell you what you're doing. Note the bottom there, it should not contain any proprietary information. So if you've got something that you're about to patent or is not covered and you don't want folks to know about, don't put it in there because this stuff shows up in public places. That's why they say that. Okay, and you see all the other parts, and there's some instructions on preparing a letter of intent and abstracts on the sites. Restrictions on letters of intent. You can only submit a maximum of 10 letters of interest for each one of these funding announcements that comes out. So hypothetically, DOE puts out 2 announcements. You could, if you wanted to, put in 20 letters of intent. That would be a heavy lift. If you find one topic that you can actually answer, great, you can focus on that. If all of a sudden 3 jump out at you, think about your resources. If you're a small business, what have you got that can actually, answer the mail on the letters of intent. All right. Now, if, it ups your odds if you can submit against more than one topic, but you got to think about, can I do a reasonable submission? And then the odds of all 3 getting selected, it's not tremendously great. So, if one gets selected, you're fine. If more than one gets selected, you might have to juggle scope between things and do a little negotiation with the agency. Letters of intent get submitted through something called PAMS, and the link to that is in the research area. You can go to it through any browser. This is what it looks like when you go there. The Department of Energy uses this for their submittals, and they also use it for reviewers. So when somebody's reviewing these things, they go in through the PAM system. I went in just to see how this worked, and it took me 7 minutes to register. It is really, really easy. All right. You come into an entry screen. It'll ask you if you don't already have a login. They'll give you a way of creating an account. This is where you end up. You go to the proposals tab. on the proposals tab under solicitations, what would you like to do? View the federal funding opportunities or announcements. You click on that and you'll get a list of all the current ones open at the DOE. Now, since they have not released the FOA for release 2, I couldn't select that for you to see. But if you look off to the right where it says actions and views, actions, you'd pull down that menu, and if a particular FOA or a particular opportunity requires a letter of intent, it'll have a little line in there that says, submit your letter of intent. You do it all online, which has gotten pretty common for government grants these days, which I'm sure Mary will smile about and say, oh yeah, grants.gov, all sorts of systems there. PAMS registration, here's some information on that. The key thing is it's not a daunting item. And if you're interested in doing this, go ahead and register. It'll take you 5 minutes, and that gets you in the system. This, I'm obviously not going to read to you, but this is a recap of how to get right down to where you need to be in the PAM system. All right, and they have a help desk. So if somehow it's not working for you, dial up the help desk and get yourself some assistance. Okay, next thing that happens is they might or might not provide feedback on your letter of intent. Here's the way this works, okay? If they think your letter of intent does not answer their topic area, is not responsive, they will send you a response back saying exactly that. Okay? Not an awful long debrief on the whole thing. They'll just say, pretty much why they don't think it fits. Thank you very much. That does not preclude you from submitting a phase 1, but it's a pretty strong signal that your probability of winning that phase 1 has gone down, right? What their recommendation is, if you want to proceed, is after you get that, go back to those topics, to the contact points they say for that particular topic, and have a conversation with them about what they are or not looking for. It'll help you, and that'll help you decide if you're going to actually continue forward to go after the phase 1. But they only send you a response if they think you're not responsive. If you don't hear anything, that's a signal that they're saying you're good to go, right? Now, what we're going to talk about now is the various things that are out there to help you, all right? Under the SBIR program, they have this thing called TABA, which is Technical and Business Assistance. What this is the government will add money to that phase 1 or that phase 2 award to help you with either technical or business area items that you need outside help for, right? So what are they talking about? These are the items, okay? Obviously, you can get the tech assistance with tech stuff, but then an awful lot of things after that are the types of things you're going to need from the commercialization standpoint. So if you don't have a hardcore commercialization person on your team running through the traps on that, this is a way of getting that activity done without having to dip into heavily into the funds you've received from the SBIR program. Now, it's $6,500 for phase 1, so that kind of limits exactly how much you can get, but you can get coaching, you can get training, you can get mentoring, you can get some assistance in how you're going to do customer discovery, how you're going to build the business model, those sorts of things, or even market analysis using that money. And your options are, you can either use the DOE's TABA provider, and there's links to them on the TABA site, which the link is in our research section, or you can engage somebody like us to help you with those things. We've got folks we help with commercializations type stuff. We don't do product sales. And honestly speaking, at this point in phase 1, you're not in the product sales mode. Okay, you're in the discovery mode, the market mode, the can I build a business model out of this mode. Those are really the things you gotta concentrate on. And you see the purposes of it. making better technical decisions, and that's going to happen when you talk to folks within the markets you're going after, and also up the probability that it's going to end up being successfully commercialized. Okay. Another thing they do, there's a thing called phase zero. They've got a phase zero support system. And if this is your first SBIR or STTR, the Department of Energy has a company they've engaged that they'll take, I think it's up to 100 a year, might be 200, but I think it might be 100, where they will provide everything from education to some technical assistance. There's even possibly some travel funds in there that can be accessed if you need to go out and do technical discovery or customer discovery. So the link to the phase zero support program, again, is on the research page, but they're going to evaluate. They're going to say, okay, you're a small company, but do you really have the capability to respond to the topics they're looking for? Next thing we have here is the Power Connector Support Program, and that's part of what OpenSeas is doing right here. And this is what we're doing. We're providing support for the level LOI submission, okay, kind of letting people know where things are, what you look for. We're providing support for the phase one submissions. So OpenSeas will be doing some training on lean startup and commercialization, how to think about those things, what the steps are, what the current state of the art is, so to speak. We'll be doing some community sessions where folks who have submitted LOIs can all come together in one place and talk about issues they're having. Probably not their technology, because obviously people are all competing against each other. And then we've got some time in there for one-on-one assistance. There are 4 other power connectors, and we're putting together a list of all the events that we're doing. So what we'll do is we'll make that available. So, if you want to sign up for one of our sessions on commercialization or whatever, or you want to sign up for one-on-one, that's great. But if you see something that University of Arizona is doing, or the Center for Energy is doing, or ADL Ventures is doing, all those will be there because we're working collaboratively. One of the other things we're trying to do as power connectors is, and I'm a baby power connector. We're new to this whole thing, but we were brought on board because we helped judge a competition, and we were asking commercial questions, and they said, "Oh, we need some of that, especially in the maritime area." But we're all collaborating, and we're looking at the timelines and going, we've got to figure a way of being able to respond to these things better. So what we want to do is we want to build a community of interested folks who are sort of prepped and knowledgeable and kind of willing to look at both SBIRs and STTRs, but also there's all sorts of innovation challenges that are put out through the Department of Energy. So we want to nurture you all as a community that as these things come up, it's, you won't be starting from scratch. You'll really be looking at the topic and saying, oh, I can respond to that topic. But you don't need to, you already know how letters of intent work, how the SBIR submittals work. You'll be ahead of the game. Schedule to follow. Okay. DOE also runs a really, really good training and information site on SBIRs and STTRs. Again, there's a link to that in the resources. So you can go in there and it's got everything from how do you put together project abstract to how do you submit an LOI to how do you do your budgeting. So the nice thing about this is we're doing some of our 101s and our community sessions. If you hit the topics in this first, that allows us to spend more time in the weeds on what you're actually talking about, as opposed to just trying to cover the basics of these various topics. So I highly recommend you go to this DOE training site on this. A lot of good modules. This is the site for the DOE Phase 0 support. And you see the types of things they do, everything from training, technology advising, intellectual property stuff, how to calculate your budget with indirect rates, which is a thing with the federal government, and potential travel assistance. So the link's there. How do you know? Oh, I was just looking at, here's Mary. How do you know if you're eligible? Little flow chart here. Basically, you got to be a small business. You have to have never applied for an SBIR. You're then eligible. You'll look at the topics. If there's a topic you think you can answer in a credible way, you're eligible. Okay, and you can submit. And again, they only, I think it's a limited number that Dawnbreaker selects into the program, what they're funded for every year. So that's something to consider. All right. All right. So these are the resources I was talking about. Okay. The DOE opportunity site, great place to go. The top line is the funding opportunities. That's where you would go to see if that FOA has been released, the Federal Opportunity Announcement. Okay. And then let's see. The topics are the next one. The next link is the topics they're looking for. From the CEDO office, the Solar Energy Office, and the EERE and the Water Power Technology offices, those 4 links below, those are webinars that they put on concerning the topics. So if you think you want to go after a solar thing, go take a look at the CEDO webinar. If you're focusing on the water stuff, go look at the water seminars just to get a feeling for the nuances. Everything's in the nuances. The topics say one thing, but you get the person who actually put the topic in place, and you might pick up a little bit that's going to help you. Second page of resources, that tutorial site. Okay, SBIR Learning, great place to go. Pam's website is next. Okay. Instructions for preparing your letter of intent, where the phase 1 support site is, and where the market studies are located. And then the last page of resources, information on the TABA program. And the thing to think about TABA, if you want to use an outside resource, like if you want to engage OpenSeas, you want to engage ADL, or you want to engage, your former coworker who's now running an operation that does that type of stuff. When you read that site, you'll see it needs to be built into your phase 1 budget. Okay, they're going to add the money. They're going to add. So if you put in a budget for $200,000, they'll add $6,500 to that budget for TABA funds. But you need to identify who you're going to use, and identify the money in the phase 1. If you don't do that, you're still eligible for TABA, but you would end up using the general company that DOE is using for TABA. So there's also OpenSeas. There's our contact information there. And if you're interested, University of Arizona, one of the other power connectors, is running a webinar next week on preparing LOIs. So that's something that's available. That's the registration link for it. And like I said, as we get the master list of all the power connectors, what our schedules are going forward in January and February, we'll be sending that out to the folks who've signed up for the OpenSeas webinars.